My name's Tom Polo and I'm the curator of There's a Hole in the Sky here at Campbelltown Art Centre. And the exhibition is a show of 9 Australian and international artists who deal with kind of extensions of portraiture in their work. And these works kind of focus on the idea of a kind of a global anxiety and how that can be presented in multiple ways, in sort of personal ways, and deal with ideas of interior space, exterior space. So in the exhibition I've really tried to, I wanted to select a real kind of range of artists that present to me a real sort of thread of ways of dealing or coping, or how the artist kind of plays that author role in talking about anxiety, and in the way that it can be about really personal things, or it could be about social things, but they've approached it in a way where there's an entry point, and often that can be humour or in a really absurdist sort of way. One example of that is an artist called Argote from Paris. He's a Colombian-based artist based in Paris, and in his work he deals a lot with the idea of the public spectacle and reaction, and what it means to get a reaction in public with strangers. And often it's about humour. For one example is his video work Birthday, where he's standing in a lift with a bunch of strangers, and he turns to them with his handheld camera and asks them to sing him happy birthday because he's new in town. And of course that sort of question, or that sort of statement, is met with nervous laughter, but they do it, and then there's this kind of this moment afterwards where it was achieved, and whether or not it was his birthday, he caused this sort of reaction, and it bridged the gap between between strangers and between community as well. He's also presenting 3 other works, one of them being a work called Untitled New York, where he has filmed over an 18-minute video. He's actually filmed strangers at different intersections in New York, turning to face the camera in sort of a really poetic way. They turn to face you, the viewer, as you're watching the video. And I guess it's really interesting to wonder how he got them to turn, and what that sort of phrase might have been, or if he had yelled for attention. Being placed in the gallery now, it becomes about them looking at us, and that's another thing that ties all the show together, in that it talks about art and artists who are really interested in the idea of not only us as a viewer looking at the work, but the work looking back at us. I think I'm just interested to know about the mechanics of like social situations, and also kind of spaces that we are really familiar with, and maybe ones that are also kind of troubling to understand. And I've always been interested, I think, in the way that people interact, and kind of how they interact in imagined space and physical space, but also in terms of relationships. So a really important thing with this exhibition are the various new commissions presented with older works in the show, and one of those is Lara Thoms, and within her work Commerce, she's actually presenting something which is quite a generous act, and it's reflective of her wider practice, where in this circumstance she started with a statistic she found online about bankruptcy in Campbelltown, and as part of that she's actually taken her material fee and her artist budget and actually put it all towards collecting items from small businesses in the local area. From those items she's actually made 147 hampers, which reflect that statistic and form a visualization of that statistic and of data. Those hampers are then able to be taken by the audience at the end of the show, so it kind of has this sort of pay it forward notion, where the idea of commerce and the idea of money and generosity just moves in a cycle. The work Crisis by Fischer, which we've borrowed from the Art Gallery of New South Wales, the John Caldor family collection, is part of a greater series of works called the 6.5 Domestic Pairs Project. And for me, this work has kind of been really lovely to have in the presence of the other works, in that it sits in space, and I've used it in the gallery space almost as a pivotal point in where it kind of fits in terms of artist practice, formally as kind of a really linear based work, but quite a work full of binaries, in that we look at it on first glance and it looks quite fragile, but then we learn that it's actually been cast in aluminium. But in fact, what holds the work together is this boulder that sits at the base of it. And we know that kind of this idea of process and this idea of the way that an artist works with materials can be really precarious. It's a nice kind of reflection on the way that younger artists and more established artists can actually work together on similar themes in exhibitions, and that's really comforting as an artist myself.